We're surrounded by noise, the pressure to be someone, to accumulate, to matter. But underneath all the scrolling and striving, haven't you felt it? That something isn't right? That this isn't what we came here for? There's an ancient truth inside you, one that, on some level, you've always known, and it's time to remember. In the beginning, there was only one being. We'll call it Tao. It was composed of everything that is, physical, non-physical, past, present, future, everything. Without anything to compare itself to, it didn't even know it existed. It's more interesting for a being to know of its existence, but how would it do this? The only option was to imagine a universe which contained more than one being. So the Tao fell asleep to its oneness, and in its dreamy imaginings it created the polarities of masculine and feminine. The masculine held the role of pure, unchanging, eternal awareness. But how would he be awareness without being aware of something? Thus the feminine, which took the role of ever-changing, ever-dancing form. She is called the Great Cosmic Mother, or matter itself. Now, with the duality of masculine awareness and feminine form, the Tao could begin to explore its nature and appreciate its beingness. Let's travel to the beginning of what is often called the human endeavor. Our ancient ancestors evolved within the womb of the Great Cosmic Mother, just as your young body formed inside your mother's womb. What does this mean? It has been referred to as the Garden of Eden. We worshipped the feminine power of nature as the direct manifestation of the divine. She was the earth, she was the moon, she was the source of all things, birth, death, and rebirth. Humanity lived by her rhythms, bled with her cycles, and knew the world was alive. Our ancestors were fully embedded into the processes and cycles of nature. Light and dark, cold and warm, hunger and satisfaction, without an additional narrative about which of various poles are better or worse. A deer does not resist the seasons, and a leaf does not aim for where it falls. In this state, we were similar to the original state of the Tao. We existed, but we didn't know we existed. We lived in the constantly unfolding present moment, a seamless being of mind, heart, and body. Resources were shared since they were recognized as part of the same organism as humans themselves, and no concept of individuality, let alone property, had been conceived of. How could one own the sustenance that was so freely provided by the Great Mother? The first sacred stories told of life emerging from the womb of the universe, a sacred ocean, a deep night, a fertile darkness. The goddess was not a myth, she was life itself. In the earliest cultures, power was not domination, it was creation, and it flowed through women, encompassing sons and daughters alike. Time wasn't a straight line, it was a spiral. It moved with the moon, not the sun. There were no empires, no kings. There were tribes, rituals, and remembrance. Then we discovered that a mind highly capable of pattern recognition was valuable to our thriving. As this pattern-noticing mind expanded its capabilities of learning from past events to prepare for future challenges, this trait became very useful. We could use our mind to observe the stars and predict the seasons. We could recognize tracks to follow prey. We began to convert the Tao as manifest in form into a puzzle for the mind to decipher and navigate using its cunning intelligence. The mind began to form an identity, so instead of simply being self, there evolved a sense of self, highly associated with the body from which it emanated and also served. At this time, even the mind recognized the pure state of grace it lived in. We thanked the Great Mother for providing berries, nuts, and fruit so freely. When men hunted, we asked the Great Mother for guidance and thanked her for providing the animal. We apologized to the animal out of gratitude and reverence for its sacrifice to enable us to live. One form of life, giving life to another form. The hunt was an essential way that men communed with each other and the Great Mother or nature herself. It was a sacred role we performed for our tribe. So what happened? How did we become so dissociated from the bounty and grace provided? How did we fall from this grace? To illustrate this, let's look at plants. Plants are obviously directly dependent on the Great Mother. Wherever their seed lands, the Great Mother either provides the soil, sun, and water for them to flourish, or she does not. Consider the lilies of the field. In life or death, they accept their position in the greater cycle of life. Animals are just as dependent on the Great Mother, but they can move to where there's food. With this ambulatory ability comes a bit more skill at enduring various conditions and adapting their bodies to more abundant environments. The drive for individual survival is stronger in animals than in plants because of their pattern recognition and being able to do something about it. But still, every calorie and every shelter is provided by nature herself, and the animal lives in a state of grace from birth to reproduction to death. But we humans, we took it a step further. See, we in our intellectual cunning partook of the fruit of what Christianity calls the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What was this fruit? Well, let's look at what really happened, beyond any religious metaphor that came to represent it. As men were out on the hunt, women were home with the children and spent their time foraging, playing, and connecting with each other. With this time, they also invented pottery, basket weaving, textile creation, herbalism, midwifery, spiritual healing practices, and the first calendars which aligned with the moon and menstrual cycles, among other innovations. All these technologies and practices included thanks to the Great Mother for resources provided and for life itself. But then, women noticed something. They noticed that in the cycle of life and death of plants, seeds were produced. And where the seed of a plant would fall, another would grow. And an idea emerged. What if I purposefully planted the seed of my choosing in the place of my choosing? What if I could cause food to grow where I live rather than live where food grows? And thus, Eve partook of the fruit and agriculture was born. Early women practiced agriculture very respectfully and cautiously, with the sense that they were stepping on the Great Mother's toes, taking her job as their own. They prayed in gratitude with each meager harvest and apologized to the earth as they dug into her to plant. They had love for their children in their heart and a desire to see them thrive. They knew they were part of a divine collaboration providing nourishment for their children. But if you know the story, Adam and Eve were not cast out of the Garden of Eden until Adam partook of the fruit. Women's innovation was not the fall of man. The fall of man from grace occurred due to the development of the male ego. You see, as we were able to predict where food would grow since we had planted it there, we began to settle in those locations. But the herds of animals we once hunted didn't settle, since they were still trusting in what the Great Mother naturally provided and surrendered to physical death without mental resistance. But men took it to the next level. Once we had excess agricultural resources, the necessity of the hunt and proximity to roaming herds were reduced. Men began spending their time and energy on agriculture, but applied the cunning acuity of their minds to improve the process and scale it. It was burdensome to keep the process ritualized as the women had. Connection and gratitude took a bit too long. Why not skip the pleasantries and begin mass production? Yes, women discovered agriculture, but it was man, or Adam, who took credit for the growth of the plants. This was the birth of the male ego, believing that he, through his intellect, had grown plants. But of course, only nature can grow plants, no matter how much effort man spends on planting and watering. So the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is fruit which man has taken credit for growing. We were not cast out of the Garden of Eden. We did not fall from grace. We left voluntarily for the pursuit of Lucifer's fantasy, wanting for ourselves the glory of God, nature, and the great cosmic mother's ability to create and sustain life. Thus, we had to work all the days of our lives in the agricultural fields rather than receive nourishment freely through the trusting hunter-gatherer way of being. Men not only had less connection with each other than they did in the hunt, but also lost their purpose and sense of sacredness in bringing home game. Their spiritual ritual and communion with the Great Mother faded and eventually disappeared. Competition grew. Working the field was hard, but their desire to hunt was still in full force. The next tribe over had a big hut filled with grain just sitting there. So pillaging began. Along with the never-before-seen excess resources came the concepts of property and ownership. Since I planted these seeds and watered and harvested these grains, they are mine. The self-concept has now expanded beyond the body and imbued itself into the fruits of the body's labor. The stores of food are imbued with a similar sense of self as the body, and they are protected with the same vigor. They are likewise targeted by less agriculturally oriented men with the same zeal as pursuing prey in the woods. This was the birth of the patriarchal ego, the mind that has gone rogue and taken credit for the life of the body and now sees the body as something to use for the domination of other bodies. Before long, the amount of resources a man had became synonymous with his ability to steal and dominate others, since obviously no single man can generate so many resources on his own. Some fearful women adopted this mindset and selectively reproduced with dominating men to take advantage of their resources, which translated to the future security and survival of their children. These men and women forgot that nature, the Great Mother, provides life freely and takes it just as freely, no matter the amount of resources we acquire. This is not because she is vengeful or unmerciful, but because the body is a shifting and changing form and therefore feminine, like the body of nature herself. She does not view her children as separate from her as we do with our mental distinctions between life and death. Our body is meant to die and return to the cycles of nature, rather than be made toxic and planted in the ground in the delusional hope that we will rise again, as is often done today. Eventually, the ever-roaming herds were stopped in their tracks through the process of domestication. Man saw that not only could they control the process of growing plants, but they could also capture animals and control their reproduction. Up to this point, many viewed the male role in conception as opening the womb for the spirit to enter. Cattle breeders discovered the role of male seed and it became elevated. The sacredness of the womb shifted to merely an empty, passive vessel. Before long, heads of cattle were used as an indicator of power and wealth. This was the invention of capitalism. Cap referring to head, heads of cattle. But this patriarchal male ego wasn't satisfied yet, nor could ever be. It realized that cattle, however valuable for milk and meat, couldn't accomplish much else. Imagine what could be possible if one man owned another man. Thus, female bodies came to be viewed as wealth-breeding machines for men. Eventually, control of female reproduction would shift from private hands to state political economies. And so this death-afraid, security-obsessed ego began a new quest. Not only the domination of plant life and animal life, but human life, and ideally the domination of the Great Mother, nature herself. If this cunning intellectual mind could dominate nature herself, then man can take survival into his own hands. The man's essential role of providing, protecting, and serving still seems so secondary to the miraculous power women have of growing life inside them and producing milk to nourish this new life. At its core, the patriarchal male ego was and is jealous of women's centrality in the creation of life. In order to rise up, the patriarchal male ego must first destroy the connection between the individual and the Great Mother, between the mind and body of those it wishes to dominate. And so began a smear campaign of the feminine by her more insolent children. Bands of men possessed by the patriarchal ego violently destroyed pagan goddess statues and warned of the harm and idiocy of worshipping the moon and aligning with natural cycles. They boasted of a new, more powerful god who is male and uses authority to demand obedience of us, his subjects. A god of light, a god of fire, a god of the sun. He came with the plow, with the sword, with the laws. He was Ra who lit the sky. He was Marduk who slew the primordial mother Tiamat, carving order from her watery womb. He was Apollo, riding his chariot across the heavens, silencing the mysteries of the moon with the logic of the day. He was Yahweh, a male that gives birth to the world, but as an architect or sculptor, and not through the gruesome blood and pain of labor as women do, but from the pure, clean, white, asexual perfection of masculine spirit. Where the goddess had once given life, the god now gave commands. He did not birth the world, he conquered her wildness, or at least believed he did. These men, infected with the patriarchal ego, conveyed symbols of man slaying the serpent or dragon, which represent feminine power. They believed and preached that man must impose order over the chaos of nature, replacing cyclical life with linear hierarchy. They claimed that the sun god from whom they received divine authority to dominate others is the true possessor of creative powers, once attributed to the moon goddess. The myths began to change. Where once creation was birth, now it was war. Where once the earth was alive, now she was dead, from living mother to mere matter. In Babylon, Marduk killed Tiamat, the chaos womb, and built the world from her dismembered body. Where once the serpent was sacred, now it was evil. In the Bible, the serpent, once a symbol of feminine wisdom and power, was cast as the devil. The new gods men created took power not through union, but through conquest. The symbolism of this slander of the divine feminine is critical in understanding how the patriarchal ego used religion and authority to restructure human consciousness, separating spirit from matter and man from nature. Why was this the agenda? Because no one who lives in a state of harmony with nature and recognizes their absolute reliance on the Great Mother would be exploitable by false authority, much less willing to obey the arbitrary rules on which it depends. The patriarchal ego mind first tears you away from awareness of your eternal nature and then offers it back to you on the condition of your obedience. This wasn't just a change in story. It was a change in the soul. As the sun gods rose, the world became a thing to own, to measure, to rule. Spirit was torn from matter. The divine became abstract, distant, masculine. The earth and matter itself became dead, according to man's narrative. And with her silence came our loneliness. The patriarchal male ego views women and the earth as nothing more than a domain to own, plow, and put his precious seed in. Then his ego takes credit for the cultivated plants, the animals bred in captivity, and the civilizations built on slave labor and stolen resources. The ego even takes credit for the creation of the baby by the mother and views the child, and sometimes the mother herself, as his property. Ultimately, this rogue ego mind takes credit for the body itself, neglecting to notice that it doesn't know how to beat its heart, grow its bones, or heal its wounds. The body is animated by the Great Mother herself in every moment. This ego has lost the plot entirely. We are at the effect of this today. We live by the Gregorian sun calendar with its months named after power-hungry patriarchs, reducing the moon to just something pretty to look at. We learn from a young age to ignore our bodily rhythms and attend school or work according to the clock to benefit the capitalist structures. Status is tied to individual accumulation, and we've become isolated from the power of deep supportive community and shared resources. We're told to worship light over darkness, clarity over mystery, and intellect over intuition. Stillness, rest, and gestation, qualities of the feminine and the womb, are not just devalued, but guilt-inducing. Through a patriarchal lens, the unknown will be feared and assumed to hold something scary, rather than more magic and possibility than we can conceive of. Like the sun god, we're told that authority descends from above, from a president, a CEO, a king, a savior. We're trained to submit to power that comes from outside ourselves, rather than authority which arises from within, from nature herself, to guide us directly in our own lives. We're told we earn our worth through effort and strategy, exerting mind over matter, viewing the body and nature itself as a resource for the all-powerful intellect. Even many spiritual paths reinforce the goal of transcendence rather than embodiment, labeling physical needs, desires, and emotions as attachments that must be severed, rather than a sacred aspect of the Great Mother's dance through us. Our mind is useful in guiding these beautiful human attributes in constructive ways that benefit everyone with a deeper, more connected experience of life. It's no mystery that patriarchal control has deeply hurt women. Their wombs, cycles, and sexual energy are now subject to legislation, suppression, and shame. By being disconnected from nature, they are taught to fear their own bodies, especially their sexual pleasure, and outsource their knowing to so-called experts. Menstruation is still seen as something to hide and stop, a mere inconvenience to the less cyclical male productivity expectations of school and workplace. Birth is medicalized, menopause is pathologized, and emotions are labeled irrational. In the mythos of sun god culture, the feminine is only desirable when fertile and pleasing to the male gaze. The natural process of aging is viewed as decline. We then discount the essential roles of the wise woman, sage, and grandmother. In ancient societies, grandmothers were oracles, holders of ritual, healing, and ancestral memory. Older women today often feel discarded and invisible, stripped of cultural purpose just as they come into their deepest wisdom. Today, the matriarch has been replaced by the CEO, the influencer, or the girl boss. Women are told that their power and equality is manifest by assuming the corrupt male qualities of ruthlessness, competition, and dominance, and then achieving status in patriarchal hierarchies as CEOs, judges, and politicians, rather than in their sacred ability to create life, which they're also expected to do. When a woman does tap into the true fierceness of feminine power, she is often labeled angry, a bitch, or too much. Assuming that a patriarchal social structure benefits men is a terrible mistake. It benefits a select few men and women at the top, while the rest have been used as cannon fodder in the mass human sacrifice rituals of war and as tax livestock in soul-crushing jobs that are disconnected from their primal functions they evolved to fulfill. Men are taught that their value is determined by their position in political, religious, or economic hierarchies, and cut off from the value of their own body and ability to directly serve and connect with their family. They learn to suppress emotion, ignore intuition, and view other men through a competitive rather than collaborative lens. They are trained to view their body as a tool, and thus become a tool, of the patriarchal virus. During adolescence, boys are met with punishment for disobedience rather than mentorship through initiation into manhood. Men have become torn between being destructive or useless, trapped between being aggressors or irrelevant, rather than initiates to the deep mysteries and guardians of life. To this day, with modern hygienic knowledge and even outside of a religious context, millions of male babies undergo genital mutilation, euphemistically called circumcision. This ritual originated as an act of separation from the mother and a binding of the boy through the shedding of blood to the patriarchal sun god, reminding him forever that his life is not his own. Patriarchal control is not masculine. It is the distortion of the masculine into an anti-human agenda. And it wounds all genders, not just individually, but collectively, by severing the primal bond between us. It keeps us divided, disempowered, and so overwhelmed that we are easily governed. Masculine traits are labeled as toxic, feminine traits are labeled as weak. We are taught we are fundamentally at odds with each other, that we are incompatible, and that our differences are liabilities rather than gifts. We are fed a narrative of resentment, that women are victims and men are oppressors. Both are roles that obfuscate our wholeness and reliance on each other and the Great Mother. Women have been systematically disempowered, and that pain is very real, but it is then capitalized on by directing it at men, rather than at the systems and patriarchal ideologies that created it. Likewise, men have been emotionally starved and spiritually exiled, but rather than seeking healing, their template has been to either accept their lot and shut down or become a tyrant themselves. Racial tension is a key tool in the divide and conquer strategy of corrupt hierarchies. As with gender division, if races are pitted against each other, they will never unite against the systems which are oppressive and harvesting the time, labor, and value from everybody. Today, these hierarchical systems demonize or erase cultures still rooted in matrifocal and earth-honoring traditions, calling them primitive or at best, developing nations. The same sun god conquest which began in the Bronze Age continues today, convincing these countries that they, the colonizers, have come to help while turning around and exploiting them for their resources, land, and labor. If they resist, they are often met with Western-backed military coups, sanctions, or outright military occupation. The same patriarchal, ego-serving system that told women they were inferior, told people of color they were subhuman, told indigenous nations they were savage and needed their cultures replaced with a better one, is the very same system that relies on all of us being divided to preserve this illusion of power. With mass communication, this game of control is reaching its zenith. We're constantly fed the ideal of human optimization, since obviously nature didn't get it quite right. We no longer trust that life will provide. We believe we must dominate, schedule, and extract value from every living thing, including ourselves. Men are sold the distractions and imitations of porn and sports, while women are meant to chase impossible beauty standards and endlessly run on the hamster wheel of self-improvement. We're offered the seductive promise of an ultra-convenient technological utopia free from disease, death, and limitations. Yet nothing could be further from the truth, since increased disconnection from our bodily wisdom and nature will continue to bury our humanity so deeply that it will be essentially lost to us. Will there even be any humanity left in us to appreciate an advanced civilization? But this mistake is nothing more than an iteration of the original mistake between the primacy of mind and body. The mind is the helper of the body and emanates from it. Now, at the advent of AI, we are faced with the same dilemma. Is it a tool which serves our sacred human nature? Or will we make the same mistake and view it, like we did the intellect, as a superior intelligence to the one that created life in the first place? The patriarchal ego is and was the original artificial intelligence, viewing the body from which it arose as dumb, fallen, unworthy of love, a thing to be conquered. We cannot afford to pass this narrative along into the age of AI. The real intelligence is that of the great cosmic mother, offered briefly to each of us as individuals for our lifetime, to contribute to her cosmic dance before the all-seeing light of awareness. You and I, we are the children of awareness penetrating form, not just at our birth, but in this very moment. This separation we feel from the grace of life itself is not just something our ancestors were subject to. It was the process you and I went through from birth to adolescence to adulthood. It's unnatural and therefore traumatic and isolating. So what's the plan? With all this awareness of how humanity has taken a very painful course, it's easy to feel despair. Many people already feel they've been born into a corrupt world at the environmental brink. It's easy to feel resignation. Don't fall into that trap. Once again, it is a ploy of corrupt power structures to convince you that you are small and powerless, even insignificant. The great news is that any sustainable collective shift arises from the ground up through individuals waking up to their own true nature. No corruption can withstand that. Embedded within this critical dilemma lies an incredible opportunity and calling, and that is for you to reclaim yourself from false authorities and agendas which don't have your best interest at heart. You don't do this through more mental control, but with more honoring of your body and recentering into your direct experience of life. Your body, like the earth herself, is far more intelligent and intuitive than you've been led to believe. Your calling is not to go to war against the corrupt structures. War is their invention, and they will win. Instead, learn to trust yourself and life itself, thus cutting the carrot off their stick and starving them of your energy and attention. Our only hope is to unite as a species, stay clear on that real mission, and not be distracted by infighting between genders, races, classes, or cultures. Even the most corrupt dominator was born as an innocent child, whose mind was then infected by the patriarchal ego. Just as cells die and new ones are created in the body, bodies die and new ones are created in the world organism. Every body is innocent. The enemy is only anti-life ideologies that get passed through generations using innocent bodies and minds as hosts. However, it is true that some bodies are possessed beyond rehabilitation and become the embodiment of anti-life ideologies. The fact is, throughout these thousands of years of oppression and exploitation, the human spirit has remained strong and has even become tempered through opposition. Despite the horrors of the world we now hear of so frequently, beautiful moments of connection, healing, and community are happening every single day. Innovations, discoveries, and aid to those in need have soared to new heights. These boons to the soul of humanity are the gems we can carry into a better future. By honoring the body and Earth herself, we can consecrate what once has been desecrated, and use the incredible inventions of the technological age to benefit the coming age of remembrance, where being human is sacred. None of your efforts to soothe or cope will work as long as you believe that you are the mind which uses the body and form for its purposes. You are not the mind. You are the miraculous child conceived of by awareness-penetrating form, and your purpose is to offer the Tao your individual perspective of an aspect of itself. The highest function of your mind is to appreciate the grand unfolding happening before you, and if you're so blessed, to have a positive impact on that unfolding. Can you humble yourself to that degree? Can you let go of your conditioned self-concept enough to devote your individual incarnation to your true purpose of supporting and sustaining the process of life itself? This starts with your own body and extends to those around you, especially women who create life, children, and the otherwise vulnerable. Your salvation is dependent on the erasure of the very self-concept you believe needs saved. There is no way out of this, since you as an individual self with needs and desires that must be fulfilled by the cunning of your mind is, and always was, an illusion. The only medicine that heals the pain of illusion is truth. And the truth is, the you that you thought you were never existed. And the you that you actually are is more magical and more essential to the cosmic unfolding than you could ever imagine. Are you willing to die to know yourself? Put your self-concept, your story, your narrative, both of victimhood and power, on the altar and set the flame. There is nothing you can do to be worthy. There is nothing you can do to be saved. There is nothing you can do to earn love. There is nothing you can do to survive. You cannot earn what is freely given. The only real question is, can you receive such transcendent love and grace? The answer is yes, because you're doing it right now.